this is Stavina House. We're in my kitchen again, combining two of my favorite things, cooking and books, but not using a cookbook, instead looking at Miss Maudie's Lane Cake from Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird. Before we get into the book, what is Lane Cake? Lane Cake got its name from Emma Rylander Lane of Clayton, Alabama. Her cake won first prize at a county fair, and she called it Prize Cake in her 1898 self-published cookbook, Some Good Things to Eat. What a great title. It's been called Prize Cake, Alabama Prize Cake, Emma Lane's Cake, and eventually just a Lane Cake. Emma Lane's granddaughter, Emma Law, gave her version of a Lane Cake recipe to the Associated Press in December of 1967. And unless you have a rare copy of Some Good Things to Eat, that's as close to the original as you are likely to find. The cake part of the Lane Cake is a white chiffon cake. Before double-acting baking powder came to kitchens in the 1860s, the only ways to make fluffy cakes were yeast cakes, creaming butter by whipping it with the sugar for a pound cake, or folding in whipped egg whites for a chiffon cake. Many early recipes with baking powder just added it as insurance against the cake going flat. Emma Law's cake might have started that way, but as she felt the baking powder could do the job, she skipped the beating the egg whites, though she does cream the butter and sugar like a pound cake. What really makes the Lane Cake is the filling. Emma Law's recipe makes a custard filling with 8 egg yolks, 1 cup sugar, 1 stick or a quarter cup of butter, 1 cup seedless raisins, a teaspoon vanilla, and 1 to 3 cups of bourbon. This is a boozy cake and is often used for celebrations and holidays where other soused cakes would be served, like at Christmas. So let's get into the book. To Kill a Mockingbird was published in 1960, and a movie was made of it 2 years later in 1962. Its setting is over 3 years in the mid-1930s during the Great Depression. Miss Maudie's cake-making acumen is referred to 5 times, twice in Chapter 5, once in Chapter 8, once in 13, and once in Chapter 22. But only 2 of these specifically reference Lane cakes. The cakes she makes regularly and gives to the children are likely the pound cakes, like she offers to Scout in Chapter 5. Her Lane cakes are special. From Mr. Avery, who bravely but foolishly hurt himself trying to save some of Miss Maudie's possessions when her house caught fire, and Aunt Alexandra when she moved into the house with the rest of the family at the time of the trial. So what hints do we have for Miss Maudie's secret recipe? In Chapter 8, Miss Maudie says, "Soon as I can get my hands clean, and when that Stephanie Crawford's not looking, I'm going to make a Lane Cake. That Stephanie's been after my recipe for 30 years. And Scout reflects, if Miss Maudie broke down and gave it to her, Miss Stephanie couldn't follow it anyway. Miss Maudie had once let me see it. Among other things, the recipe called for 1 large cup of sugar. And Chapter 13 says, Miss Maudie baked a Lane Cake so loaded with shiny, it made me tight. So, we know that Miss Maudie's cake has a large cup of sugar, and we know there's shiny in it. That 1 cup of sugar is problematic. Emma Law's cake has 2 in the cake batter and another 1 in the filling. Emma Law's cake isn't anything special. So here's my guess. Miss Maudie uses her regular white cake recipe for the cake and showed Scout the special filling recipe. This special sauce is what has the cup of sugar mentioned in the book. Now, about that shiny. I've heard some teachers say that shiny is sugar. This is where I roll my eyes at selective censorship, where teachers tried to make Miss Maudie look good. She already looks good, but tried to make her look better by taking the booze out of her boozy cake. This book has a lot of very deep topics in it. It has a lynch mob, a morphine addict, a rape trial, a woman brutally beaten, a man shot 17 times, and an attempted murder on 2 kids. Oh, and a cover-up at the end of the novel. So trying to make it so that Miss Maudie's cake doesn't have bourbon in it to, I don't know, lighten things up is not going to actually change the character of this book. So don't change the recipe of Miss Maudie's thing. Shiny is alcohol. And there's a lot of different choices for alcohol that you could have in this. In original laying cake recipes, you could use bourbon, you could use brandy, you could use wine. You could, if you wanted to, use white grape juice or apple juice if you didn't want to put alcohol in it. So what do we know about alcohols in the book? We know that Miss Merriweather steals gin from one of her neighbors. We know Mr. Underwood has an ever-present jug of cherry wine next to him. We know that, whiskey's in it a lot. Atticus didn't like it in Chapter 5. We know the Cunninghams made stump-hole whiskey in Chapter 1. We know Aunt Rachel takes a neat glass of whiskey every morning to keep away rattlesnakes. Whiskey is talked about a lot. So, is it whiskey? Or is it bourbon? Whiskey can be made anywhere in the world, but bourbon specifically is a word that came about in the 1850s, and it's a corn-based whiskey. It must be made in the United States and have at least 51% corn in it. So we could use wine or brandy, particularly made of scuppernong grapes. They're a muscadine grape mentioned in the book, and it's one of the oldest wines and brandies in the United States. But Emma Law uses bourbon, so I'm going with that. Now let's get back to my guess at making Miss Maudie's laying cake. I'm going to use my go-to white cake recipe. Miss Maudie said that time indoors was time wasted, so what's really important is the filling. I'm going to make the laying filling with 1 cup bourbon, 1 cup sugar, 1 cup seedless golden raisins, 1 cup pecan pieces, plus 8 egg yolks, a stick of butter, and I might throw in some vanilla. Miss Maudie would likely have used her own scuppernong raisins, but you have to cut the seeds out, so I'm using golden raisins I bought from the store. Pecans are mentioned as growing in the neighborhood, and I think their crunch would be nice in and on the cake, so even though Emma Laws doesn't use them, I'm going to put in pecans. The yolks, butter, and sugar all get mixed and cooked into a custard first. But before I start that, I need to do something with the bourbon and raisins. Let's let those soak together. And now, take the yolks, sugar, and butter over to the mixer. I'm going to mix the yolks by themselves until they look lighter in color, and then I'll slowly add in the sugar. Once they are well mixed, I'm going to drop in pieces of room temperature butter, making sure to scrape the sides of the bowl so no sneaky chunks stick to the sides, leaving big butter pieces. Then that goop goes into the saucepan on a low to medium low temperature. You need to heat this slowly and constantly stir with a flat spatula so you don't get an overcooked spot on the bottom. Once the custard thickens, like you see here, add in the liquid from the raisin soak. That's going to loosen up the custard some. It's okay. Cook it down a little bit more and then add in the soaked raisins and cook a little longer, stirring the whole time. Near the end, add in the pecan pieces and the vanilla so the vanilla is still strong and the pecan pieces don't get too mushy. The vanilla and the pecans made the custard turn darker when I cooked it down. If you can't get the custard to thicken after adding in the alcohol, you could cheat with some vanilla pudding mix. Hey, Miss Maudie said, time indoors is time wasted. However, I was able to get mine to thicken, though it did turn to a darker color. So if you want to keep it a light color, you might want to either use a lighter colored alcohol, not put in the vanilla, not put in dark colored nuts, or cheat with pudding. I then took my filling off of the heat and set it into the fridge while I made the 2 8-inch cakes, cooled them, split them to make 4 layers, and got them ready. I reheated the filling for 1 minute in the microwave and then generously spooned it between each layer of the cake. I then covered it and put it into the fridge. If I had had a 3-layer cake, I could have topped the cake with the boozy custard. Because I did a 4-layer cake, I ran out, so I need a frosting. Emma Law asks for a boiled white frosting, but I think I'm going to load a little more shiny in. I'm making a thick glaze, with 1 cup confectioner sugar, 2 tablespoons bourbon, and 2 tablespoons pecan oil. You can use any neutral flavored oil, but I happen to have pecan oil, so that's what I'm using. It takes about 1 batch of thick glaze to do the sides, and another thinned out with a splash more bourbon to drizzle on top. I pressed some praline honey roasted pecans to the sides and then made the topping, letting it drip down the sides. I could have made it a little bit more liquid to get longer drips down the sides, but I think it's pretty enough for the first try. Now I can attest to this cake being sweet, boozy, and a good special treat for the holidays. Now if you look on Wikipedia, modern laying cakes use coconut, but I'm sure if Miss Maudie used that, Scout or her brother Jem would have commented on something that exotic. Now you can experiment with a laying cake with maybe peach brandy and dried apricots, or cherry kirsch with dried cherries, or light rum with dried mango or dried pineapple to go with that coconut and do a tropical theme. Because everybody has their own secret recipe for a laying cake, you can really experiment and try what you like. Thank you for joining me on this fun cooking adventure where we look at a dish that is made in a literature book and I try to recreate it with my general know-how. If you like this video, please leave a comment so I know that it's something you want to see more of. You can give it a thumbs up, you can subscribe, and I'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.